In psychology, we call this Dark Triad. It's the lethal combination of traits used by the world's most dangerous manipulators to get exactly what they want at your expense.
You know, we've all met them. People who seem to be playing a completely different game than the rest of us. They manipulate, they demand all the attention, and they act without a care in the world for others. Well, today, we're going to dive deep into the psychological framework that actually connects them all. It's a fascinating and honestly an often misunderstood concept called the Dark Triad. I mean, really think about it for a second. We've all been there, right? You've got that coworker who kind of quietly exploits everyone to get ahead. Or maybe that friend who needs to be the center of the universe, constantly seeking admiration. And then there's that person you know who just acts without ever thinking about the consequences. On the surface, these feel like totally different problems. But what if I told you they all spring from the same psychological root? Well, it turns out psychology actually has a name for this. It's a framework called the Dark Triad. And even though the concept has only been around for about 20 years, it gives us this incredibly powerful lens to see the hidden patterns connecting all these tricky behaviors. So, what exactly is the Dark Triad? Well, it's basically a cluster of 3 personality traits: Machiavellianism, Narcissism, and Psychopathy. Now, here's the most important part to get. These are considered non-pathological. We are not talking about clinical diagnoses here. Instead, you've got to think of these traits as existing on a spectrum, which means, yeah, we all have them to some degree. This framework is all about understanding everyday behaviors, not just the extreme cases you see in movies. Okay, so to really get a handle on this, we need to break down each part of the triad. So let's take a closer look at the 3 distinct faces of this, well, darker side of personality. First up, you've got Machiavellianism, and yes, it's named after that Machiavelli. This trait is all about strategic manipulation, having a pretty cynical view of the world, and truly believing that the ends justify the means. Next is Narcissism. This one comes from the Greek myth of Narcissus, the guy who fell in love with his own reflection. It's defined by this deep-seated feeling of superiority, of entitlement, and this bottomless pit of a need for admiration. And finally, we have psychopathy, which is marked by high impulsivity, a real lack of empathy for other people, and feeling little to no remorse for what they do. Okay, so we've got the definitions down. But how do these abstract ideas actually play out in the real world? You know, how do they shape the behavior of people who seem to be getting along just fine in society? Let's dig into that. This is the key question, right? A 2024 study wanted to figure this out by looking at a perfectly healthy group of people. I mean, if these traits are on a spectrum, they have to show up in subtle, everyday ways. And one of the key behaviors they zoomed in on was impulsivity. But here's the thing, not all impulsivity is created equal. Researchers actually split it into 2 types. On one side, you have functional impulsivity. This is the good kind, acting fast, grabbing opportunities, being decisive. Think of it as being adventurous, a real go-getter. But on the other side, there's dysfunctional impulsivity. This is the reckless stuff, acting without a single thought for the negative consequences. It's the kind of carelessness that always seems to get people into trouble. And this is where it gets really interesting. Here's what that study found. Psychopathy was linked to both kinds of impulsivity, the adventurous kind and the reckless kind. Machiavellianism, though, was only connected to the reckless, dysfunctional side of things. And narcissism, it was pretty strongly correlated with functional impulsivity, that drive to act decisively to get that status or admiration they crave. Now, these traits don't just mess with personal decisions. They can have a massive impact on group dynamics, especially in a place we all know and love, the workplace. One of the most destructive yet weirdly common behaviors at work is something researchers call knowledge hiding. And this isn't just, oops, I forgot to share that file. No, this is an intentional move to withhold or hide information that a colleague has specifically asked for. It can absolutely cripple teamwork and kill innovation. So what on earth makes someone do this? Well, the research points to one incredibly powerful attitude: psychological entitlement. This is that stable, deeply held belief that you deserve more than other people. Better assignments, more rewards, special treatment, all without necessarily earning it. And studies show a really clear path for how this all unfolds. A person who is high in one of the Dark Triad traits is way more likely to develop a strong sense of psychological entitlement. And that feeling, that deep-seated belief that they deserve more, directly leads them to hide knowledge. Why? Because they see their knowledge as a personal treasure to be guarded, not something to be shared with the team. But here's the kicker. Are all three traits equally guilty? Not even close. When researchers measured the predictive power of each trait, they found that while all three are linked to knowledge hiding, psychopathy is, by a huge margin, the strongest predictor. Its impact is more than double that of Machiavellianism. This suggests that the impulsive and low empathy parts of psychopathy are a particularly toxic fuel for this kind of workplace behavior. So, after looking at the definitions, the impulsive behaviors, and the mess they can make at work, let's pull it all together. Let's talk about how we can navigate this darker side of personality. Look, understanding the Dark Triad isn't about running around and slapping labels on people. It's about pattern recognition. It gives us a vocabulary to understand why that one boss might be so manipulative or why a coworker just refuses to collaborate. It gives us a framework for behaviors that can otherwise seem totally random and just confusing. So, what are the big takeaways here? First, remember that these traits are on a spectrum and they exist in all of us. Second, they show up in real, tangible ways, from reckless behavior to calculated career moves. And third, they have serious real-world consequences in places like the office. When it comes down to it, awareness, both of others and, of ourselves, is the single most powerful tool we have for dealing with these complex social dynamics. And that really leaves us with one final question to chew on. Now that you have this framework, how is it going to change the way you see the world around you? And maybe, just maybe, how will it change the way you see yourself? Now that's something worth thinking about.